Hi, and thanks for attending our latest in a series of Energy Storage Partners webinars. My name is Mark, I'm from Morningstar. Today we're talking about making lithium affordable, and we have a new brand with us today, KiloVault Battery. They've been getting a lot of attention lately. You can download their information in the webinar handouts section, and we'll be recording the webinar and making it available to attendees later so you can reference it anytime you like. And make sure you stick around for the question and answer session after the webinar. On the Morningstar side, we have Jake Sherry. He's a technical sales engineer with Morningstar. And most recently, Jake's taken the lead on Morningstar's Energy Storage Partner Program. Jake's been with Morningstar for 5 years, and he's been a featured speaker at numerous off-grid solar webinars. He holds a BS in mechanical engineering from the University of Delaware. And at Morningstar, he's responsible for contributing to the company's regional and global sales engineering and customer support efforts. On the KiloVault side, our presenter is Nate Dooley. Nate's a technical sales representative, and he's been with KiloVault for 2 years now. He's experienced in residential off-grid and backup solar electrical systems, and he's responsible for essential system design, pre and post sales technical support, and managing retailer, installer, and distributor accounts. Along with a degree in environmental studies, Nate holds NABCEP's Photovoltaic Associate Certification. So I'm going to turn it over to Nate right now to open up the webinar.
All right, well, thanks, Mark, and thank you all for attending. So first, I'm just going to chat a little bit about who we are as a company before discussing a few of our most popular products. So KiloVault was founded a couple of years ago and really based actually in more than 20 years of experience in the off-grid industry. We currently distribute out of Massachusetts and California. We're actually looking soon to expand our distribution network throughout the US, into Latin America, and also into Canada. So if there are any distributors or resellers on the webinar, we will leave a link at the end of the presentation for an application where you could apply to become a certified dealer of the KiloVault products, and we'd love to have you apply. So who we are, what we do. Ultimately, we seek to provide innovative yet affordable renewable energy solutions for both residential and commercial applications. We design, market, and sell energy storage products based on those leading edge technologies and ultimately reduce the cost of entry for homeowners and therefore allow them to reduce their impact on the environment. So the reason why we are so proud of our KiloVault product line is, first of all, when you look at the life cycle cost per kilowatt hour of our product, meaning not just the cost per kilowatt hour, but the cost per kilowatt hour over the course of the lifespan of these products, they are among the most competitive prices in the industry today. And aside from that, this wide range of products allows for a great degree of application flexibility, whether it be different voltage configurations, wide temperature, operating temperature ranges, various installation options in terms of mounting location and orientation, and also the ability to build on your system, or the scalability of these systems, which is oftentimes a really attractive selling point for homeowners and installers when we're talking about predominantly lithium iron phosphate storage. Having the flexibility to build on that system a couple of years down the road makes customers feel a little bit more comfortable with the product. Not only that, we also offer a great degree of monitoring options, whether it be via Bluetooth or Wi-Fi connectivity. And finally, the vast majority of our products, at least those that we're going to talk about today, are safe lithium iron phosphate chemistry. And when you look, or when we talk about lithium in the industry today, there's a number of lithium ion options on the market today. The reason we use lithium iron phosphate is because it is not only cost effective, but you also get the advanced cycle life and high allowable charge and discharge currents, which we'll talk about. But most importantly, it's safe. You don't need to worry about thermal runaway like you do with lithium cobalt. If you run after a lithium iron phosphate, it's not going to come. So it is safe. So instills a degree of confidence in our customers purchasing these products. So we're going to talk about principally two of our offerings today, really the two battery options that we probably sell the most of, and for good reason. So the first one is our 7.5 kilowatt hour wall hanging lithium iron phosphate unit, the KiloVault Hab. So it's a nominal 48 volt battery, which basically means it can work with just about any of the inverters and charge controllers on the market today that allow for custom set points, which our friends at Morningstar will talk about in a little bit here. And you'll see that one of the most attractive features is the high allowable charge and discharge current, which for residential applications, is really important to be able to essentially use the power from the battery when you want to. You can discharge it incredibly quickly when the grid goes out, for example, and recharge it quickly when the utility is back, or with solar. Aside from the charge and discharge current, these batteries do have integrated Wi-Fi, so they can securely share information with the cloud, and you can monitor the system remotely. At 80% depth of discharge, you'll get approximately or at least 4,000 cycles. The reason we rate it like that is because it really depends on how you are cycling the battery, right? If you are charging and discharging always at the max allowable current, you'll probably get 4,000 cycles on the money. If you're using the battery in a less aggressive setting, then you'll certainly get more than 4,000 cycles. And like I said, it's wall mounted, so it's up off the ground. If it's in the basement, you don't need to worry about flooding. And it is heavy, 208 pounds of battery, but they come with the required mounting brackets and lifting handle. So with two people, you can do it fairly easily. Here's a quick look at the front of the Hab battery. You'll see from a distance, there's the LED state of charge indicator. So from across the room, you can get a rough idea as to the current state of charge of the battery. And then zooming in on the LCD control panel, you get a greater degree of information, voltage, kilowatt hours, percent state of charge, temperature data, cycle count, and so on, as well as the on-off button. And then on the picture to the right, you can see the side view of the Hab, where our DC cables will attach to our inverter, and then two COM inputs for inverter communication, which will be coming soon over Modbus. And then also what's really neat is the communication between other Hab batteries in a stacked system, which I'll talk about in just a second. So basically these systems are, like I said, incredibly scalable, whether it's a single unit backing up your critical loads, multiple units maybe backing up a whole house, all the way up to 14 units in parallel, which effectively is over 100 kilowatt hours of total storage, about 80 something kilowatt hours of storage if we're assuming 80% depth of discharge, which really could at that point be a light commercial application. So here you'll see a very rough schematic of what these systems look like in a stacked battery system. What I really want to highlight is that green line on the top, which is representative of the inter-battery communication. And the cool thing about these batteries, something that sets them apart from some of the other lithium iron phosphate batteries on the market, is their ability to communicate with one another and adjust their charging accordingly. So if one battery is charging faster than another for some reason, which is actually very common with lithium iron phosphate cells in general, they just will sometimes accept charge and discharge differently. The batteries are able to balance one another because they're communicating and sharing data, which is pretty neat. So whether it's a standard split phase or three-phase application, the batteries don't know or don't care, but it can be configured any which way with a number of inverters on the market and charge controllers like Morningstar. And this is a quick look at what the remote monitoring looks like. Simply scan the QR code to connect, and as long as the batteries have a Wi-Fi connection at the site, you can view this data remotely. You'll see state of charge, voltage data, current capacity, temperature data, and so on, all online. So just to sum up the intended applications, like I said, for a lot of customers, just a single Hab on the wall, 7.5 kilowatt hours is probably enough for the backup that they're looking for, really. Back up your fridge, some lights, and maybe a few additional outlets. You can start with a single Hab and build up, with a couple others. You can probably back up your whole house depending on the usage. Like I said, also, if you're stacking up to 12, 14 units, it could be used in a light commercial application as well. And for installers, the Wi-Fi connectivity really is appealing because it allows you to do some troubleshooting remotely, understand what the system is doing ahead of time, and then hopefully prevent a truck roll if possible. So that's the KiloVault Hab. The other battery line I want to talk about today is the HLX series. So again, the Hab was our 48-volt wall hanging unit. The HLX series was actually the first battery that we released, and these are the 12-volt models, one coming in an 1800 watt-hour configuration, the other in a 3.6 kilowatt-hour or 3600 watt-hour configuration. So they're both 12-volt units. Really, the only principal difference is their size and their amp hour capacity. You'll see that the 1800 watt-hour unit is about the size of a Group 40 battery, and the 3600 watt-hour unit is about the size of a Group 8D. And I mean, really what we're looking for here is options for replacing existing lead acid battery banks, right? So when we say drop-in replacement, not only, can you just drop the batteries in, you're also utilizing about the same space that you would in an 8D or 4D battery, but compacting a lot more power or capacity into that same size. The 1800 watt-hour batteries are actually small enough where they can ship FedEx ground, which is really nice for remote cabin applications. If someone's looking to replace their battery bank, you're not sending a truck out. They can ship ground and significantly reduce the cost of shipping for the end user. And the only other thing I really want to highlight about the specs is, again, that high charge and discharge current, which is really, really important these days, especially when we're talking about AC coupling applications or residential storage, where you typically have a really large solar array and a fairly modestly sized battery bank, just sized for the critical loads. The batteries can handle that charge current from the entire array without issue. With lead acid batteries, you oftentimes have to be pretty concerned with the charge rate of these batteries, not putting too much current into them at a given time and potentially reducing their lifespan. So moving on to the design of these battery banks, the nice thing about using a 12-volt battery as opposed to the KiloVault Hab, which is a nominal 48-volt battery, is that it's fairly modular. So you'll see you could start with a 12-volt battery, a single 12-volt inverter charge controller, and eventually build up if the customer needs to expand the system down the road, build up to a 24 or 48-volt battery bank by just wiring additional batteries in series. With these batteries, the maximum bank size we support is 16 batteries or 4 strings of 4 in parallel. And keep in mind that charge or discharge current that I had mentioned on the previous slide is additive per string. So it's actually 150 amps of allowable charge or discharge current per string, which basically means that these batteries could work with incredibly large inverter systems or PV arrays and multiple stacked charge controllers without issue. And just like a lead acid bank, it's important when you're installing the system to ensure that the cable, interconnect cables and parallel cables and home run cables are the same length as one another. And when initially commissioning the system, ensuring that each battery is within 0.2 volts of those in the same series string. And just in terms of what is really most appealing about these batteries, I've already kind of touched on the high charge and discharge current, especially in residential storage applications. They can also handle higher surges from larger inverters for 500 amps for 3 seconds, for example, which in a stacked Radian or XW system could very well be a possibility. And when we're talking about building this battery bank up to 16 units in total, that's upwards of almost 60 kilowatt hours for the larger model, which is a pretty significant amount of storage for residential systems. And then kind of the last note that I just want to touch on with these batteries is oftentimes when we talk about lithium, there's a barrier that is the temperature, the allowable temperature range of these batteries. So with lithium iron phosphate cells, you really don't want to ever charge the batteries below freezing. You run the risk of causing irreparable harm. Typically, they can be discharged at a slightly lower temperatures, but for cooler environments, they really should be in an insulating enclosure and ensure that the batteries are never charged below freezing. Fortunately, the BMS in these batteries will shut down if they are outside any of their operating parameters, whether it be temperature, overcurrent, under voltage, over voltage. The battery will protect itself. But it might not be a good design if the battery is constantly shutting down due to cold temperatures. So that's why we recently, this year, actually released the HLX Series, which is a cold-rated version of the HLX battery. And basically, the specs are exactly identical. The only principal difference is that there is a internal warmer to keep the BMS in the cells warm enough during the day to be able to receive a charge. The warmer won't use the stored capacity from the battery, meaning that it won't run all night and self-discharge over the course of the night. But effectively what it does is when the batteries are receiving a charge, whether it be from a charge controller or from an AC source such as the grid or the generator, the batteries will divert some of that incoming charge current to power the internal warmer and therefore keep the cells at a warm enough temperature to be able to safely accept a charge. And what we're hoping is really that this makes lithium a feasible option in certain areas where it otherwise wouldn't have been in the past due to colder temperatures. And with that, I am going to go ahead and pass the mic over to Jake from Morningstar.
All right. Do this real quick. Switching presenters here. Hang on one second. All right, so I think we're good here. Okay. All right. Well, thanks, Kyle. We really appreciate the background on the KiloVault line, and I'm really excited to talk about how Morningstar helps to facilitate the integration with these batteries, and give you a little bit of background on our history. For those of you unfamiliar with the company, we've been around since 1993. That was our inception year, and since then we've sold and distributed over 4 million of our products into the field. Those products have been distributed in over 100 countries, again, primarily targeting mission critical applications. That's what our reputation is probably best founded on, having a very high reliability. We do cater to a range of applications, including residential and rural electrification, commercial, definitely have strengths in some of those industrial applications I mentioned, including telecom, oil and gas, and security, and then also some recreational applications such as mobile, marine, and agricultural as well. We do consider ourselves the charging experts. This is because we do have the widest and most comprehensive diversified product line for charge controllers in the industry. We'll talk about some of what's included in our portfolio of products coming up in just a little bit. And as I mentioned before, with reliability being key for many of our mission critical customers, we do pride ourselves in having the lowest hardware failure rate in the industry. So that definitely speaks highly to Morningstar's reputation. So as it's come to our attention in recent years, we've gotten a lot of customer inquiries day in and day out, about 30% of which do inquire about the use of lithium in the remote solar applications that we serve. Primarily, customers are interested in the benefits of extended cycle life and the ability to tolerate partial state of charge, which is fairly common in those off-grid remote locations. Again, all of this would help to cut down on the maintenance for those remote locations that are only accessible maybe at certain times of the year, and maybe cost prohibitive with each maintenance visit or unnecessary site visit. So one of the most common requests that our customers make when we give out surveys and collect information from customer support logs is they want the semblance between manufacturers to be much easier, to instead of being passed around between manufacturers trying to locate the proper charge settings. We've all had that feeling. They really wanted somebody to step up and try to make that integration a lot more straightforward for the end user. And that's what we've done. That's really the primary reason for creating our energy storage partner program, of which KiloVault is an important part of. So there were really three intentions with the program. One, we wanted to assure system designers that the two components that they were pairing together were compatible, interoperable, make the installation easier and save time by outlining all of the necessary settings into pre-configured configuration files they can easily upload on site, and then really just provide the end users with more peace of mind in having a proven, vetted, and documented energy storage system. So both manufacturers stand behind their product confidently, including the interoperability between them. So what you see here is Morningstar's range of controllers that would be compatible with lithium batteries, both PWM controllers and MPPT controllers we offer. You can see them listed here from smallest to largest, moving right in both categories. We'll talk a little bit more about some of the specific features and capabilities that are provided on some of those controllers in the slides coming up. But just to give a little bit more conceptual background for our users that are sort of new to charge controllers and how they integrate within a system, basically it's really the heart and brains of an off-grid solar electric system. It manages the incoming power flow and current from the solar panels to the battery and regulates that charging current at a specific target voltage for the battery based on custom pre-specified set points. It has to make sure that the battery doesn't get overcharged, but wants to make sure that it still maintains a high enough charge to promote a healthy cycle life. These, again, will be included in different system configurations, whether you have AC or DC loads. What you see here on this slide is an example of an AC load configuration where you also have the inverter pictured here. It's our little SureSign inverter for 12-volt battery systems that will help you to power some AC loads like lights, computers, maybe a radio or TV, anything to that extent. Both components will help to manage the system. Again, the charge controller being a very crucial part of it, as it's ensuring the healthy lifespan for the battery, making sure it's getting charged as is specified by the manufacturer. When you look at this next example, we're looking at DC loads. Again, these are often found in more of the industrial type systems that Morningstar is widely familiar with, including some lighting, telecommunications, traffic control systems, often use purely DC loads. So in that case, the charge controller takes on even more responsibility within the system, as many of our controllers include load management capabilities, either for lighting control or preventing sensitive voltages from reaching DC loads. And that's typically what you'll find in, again, many of our controllers. So the emphasis here is that when you're choosing a controller, because of the amount of responsibility it takes on within the system, it has a direct impact on the lifespan of your batteries and really your overall system operation So it's not a decision you want to rush into or take lightly, because if you do, it will quickly show itself, again, reflected in a more costly investment like those of your batteries. You want to make sure they're being charged as they're intended to be. So just to talk a little bit about what enables our controllers to provide that very accurate control and optimization of the system overall, Morningstar MPPT controllers utilize what's called our TrackStar maximum power point tracking algorithm. And this is something that's very highly regarded in terms of trying to squeeze every last bit of solar array power in challenging conditions when it might be cloudy or you have poor solar insolation. You're able to really maximize the amount of power you get out of the solar panels. This graphic here just kind of illustrates how it works. As typically, take for instance the example here is using a 12-volt module, like a 36-cell panel. And if you have that, you'll find the specifications rated on the data sheet by the manufacturer indicate a maximum power point voltage around 17 volts. 17 to 18 volts is fairly common for those 36-cell modules in terms of where you want to operate to get the most out of them. With PWM controllers, you're just, due to the nature of them, you're confined to operate within a specific window of battery voltages. So if it's a 12-volt battery, your array is only going to be allowed to operate between 10 and 15 volts, depending on the battery state of charge. Our MPPT controllers can actually allow the array to operate at slightly higher voltages. So then you're collecting all of that additional extra power. And that, at the end of the day, you could typically see anywhere from 5 to 15% more energy stored and harvested in your battery each day. So that can really make a difference in some challenging climates. So as I mentioned earlier, again, Morningstar has a number of lithium compatible controllers. One of the ones featured here is our ProStar MPPT, sort of represents maybe the latest and greatest in terms of feature content that is well suited to charging lithium batteries. One feature specifically that is well suited here is called the low temperature fold back setting. And that's available either through our interactive meter display option, which you see here, or via MS View, which is our custom programming software. You can connect to a PC using a USB adapter. But that setting is very valuable. As Nate was talking about before, the D rate with KiloVault, they have a specific, they just introduced a specific line for the CHLX series of the 12-volt line. And that's very good because, again, it can allow, keep the batteries operating at an optimal temperature where you can continue to allow charging. For other instances where you're reaching a low temperature threshold where, again, you're risking damage to the battery, you want to be able to taper the charge current by the external charging device, that being our controller. So we can do that through this low temperature foldback setting by specifying both a high and a low temperature threshold. And you can, what that instructs the controller to do is to linearly perform a linear derate of the charging current from reaching the high threshold all the way down until it reaches that low threshold cutoff, so that you ensure you're still allowing what can be accepted by the battery all the way up until that hard cutoff when you need to stop all charging. So again, that's a popular feature used for lithium battery charging. Also, some other sophisticated features, remote temperature sensor can actually double as sort of an auxiliary disconnect or a remote on-off switch. So certain batteries, if they have additional output signaling on their battery management system, they can use that to basically open or close a circuit connected to our RTS terminals for our remote temperature sensor. You typically don't need the remote temperature sensor for lithium battery charging, at least not for temperature compensation, because lithium batteries don't need to be temperature compensated. They're stable throughout the temperature range. However, again, being able to utilize that remote connection point, you can instruct the controller to actually turn off and disable charging, which is a valuable feature, again, to prevent any internal disconnects or sudden internal disconnects by the battery management system. In addition, you'll have really accurate voltage sense capabilities found on a lot of our controllers, a pair of terminal inputs where you can attach the voltage sense leads directly on the battery terminals, so then you're compensating for voltage drop over a certain wiring distance. Again, that improves the accuracy and the regulation of the charge controller. So those are all things you would want to make use of in a lithium battery system. So what we've kind of boiled it down to here is 7 lithium characteristics that you should be aware of if you are transitioning from lead acid as a drop-in replacement, as Nate was talking about earlier. One is the existence of a battery management system. So that's very important, obviously, for lithium because, as Nate mentioned, the cells can become unbalanced, and that imbalance, although it's not as much problematic in lead acid batteries, it can become problematic in lithium batteries. So you want to keep that in check and have some sort of balancing systems to make sure that the cells are being equally charged, and that they have some protection mechanisms built in to protect against overvoltage or current, over temperature, etc. And so again, that definitely changes the integration in working with these batteries. You'll also find that they have a narrower voltage range. There's less voltage fluctuation or voltage travel for the resting voltages of a lithium battery. Again, that has pros and cons. Generally, again, the voltage is going to be very stable throughout the battery's state of charge. So even at low state of charge, the battery voltage is not going to fall off a cliff. So you want to, however, you do want to make sure that you have accurate monitoring for the state of charge. You know, you're doing true either shunt measurement or it's being calculated internally by the battery management system, where you can visually see the battery's state of charge in terms of a percentage of capacity, because again, just utilizing voltage is not going to be very accurate, as you can have, 80% state of charge, you can have the same battery voltage as 20% state of charge, and you wouldn't know any better in terms of using the voltage measurement to correlate that to actually how much energy is stored in the battery. Also, again, the cold temperature charging, as Nate mentioned, again, that's something you want to be aware of, especially in the cold conditions. The low temperature foldback feature that you find on some Morningstar controllers can definitely help to address that. Again, you have the cold temperature variants of the HLX, the CHLX series, that I think would be very useful for those types of environments where cold temperatures are a concern. Full discharging, again, that's something that you'll see with different manufacturers in terms of how they rate it. You'll notice the cycle life that Nate quoted earlier, the 4,000 cycles, was at 80% depth of discharge. And that's typically where you want to have your LVD set point for any DC or AC loads. set on your charge controller or your inverter, because you don't want to discharge much below that. Some lithium manufacturers I know have said, oh, you can discharge it all the way to 0% state of charge. Well, it's not really. You have to still leave some of that electrolyte in there in order to be able to recover it. Otherwise, you're risking permanent damage. So that's one additional thing. A lot of people say, okay, well, with lead acid, I was used to not being able to discharge below 50% state of charge. With lithium, you really want it to be at around that 20% state of charge threshold in order to promote and maximize your cycle life and avoid, risking damage to the battery. Low self-discharge. Again, these battery voltages are very stable, even at rest if they're in storage. You don't have to keep them on a float charge like you do with lead acid batteries. They'll maintain that charge for very long periods of time. Some, I believe, have storage periods for 2 years, where, again, the voltage is still going to be resilient enough to, in terms of the shelf life, to be able to recover that battery without sacrificing any harm. And again, the high charge and discharge rate Nate talked about with both the HAB and the HLX series and the CHLX having very high charge and discharge tolerances. That's very important because that's a major defining factor, differentiating it from the lead acid batteries, where you really had to be more sensitive of that. Again, there's some elasticity in terms of recommended charge current and maximizing cycle life you want to be aware of, but in general, much more accommodating than the lead acid batteries without, creating any damage. And then, of course, there is the higher upfront cost. But again, you have to consider that over the cycle life of the battery. And as Nate was talking about early on in the beginning, the cost per kilowatt hour over the life cycle is what really matters. And that's where KiloVault's batteries really stand apart in being a very competitive option on the market. So I'm just going to pass it back to Nate to take a couple more slides here. And then, Nate, I can advance the slides for you if you just want to talk through these.
Yeah, that sounds great. So just to kind of piggyback on what Jake was saying here, when we are trying to evaluate the cost effectiveness of lithium batteries specifically, it's really important to break it down based on their total life cycle cost. So a tangible or quantitative way to do this is to take that total cost and then divide it by not only the kilowatt hours, but also factoring in the total number of cycles you're going to get out of the battery and the percentage of available capacity or usable capacity. And what you'll see, Jake, if you switch to the next slide, you'll see that the cost per kilowatt hour per life cycle or over the lifespan of the batteries is tremendously lower for lithium iron phosphate batteries such as the KiloVault, HLX, and HAB series batteries as compared to your typical AGM battery. So this example of an AGM battery got only about 500 cycles at 50% depth of discharge. The manufacturer actually recommended going a little bit lesser than 50% depth of discharge, but since 50% is typically what's used, that's what we use for comparison's sake. And you'll see that the cost per kilowatt hour is tremendously lower, like I said, for the lithium options. And, like Jake was saying, the tricky part with a lot of these lithium iron phosphate systems is that upfront cost. But when you're able to explain to the end user that, you're going to need to replace the AGM battery 12 times over the course of its lifespan as compared to what the lithium would be, all of a sudden that upfront cost looks a little bit more palatable. So if you are an installer or a distributor trying to sell these batteries, or an end user trying to make your own educated decision, life cycle cost per kilowatt hour is really probably the best way to analyze, the what is the best bang for my buck. And lithium iron phosphate, especially those batteries in the KiloVault line, really do meet that standard.
Okay, excellent.
So that's all I had.
Jump and show you what the extent of our cooperation, between these two manufacturers, KiloVault and Morningstar, has been through our energy storage partner program. We've gone ahead and ironed out a lot of these details that we just discussed, things that are important to consider when you're integrating these two components. So we can take the guesswork out of it for you, and you can rest assured that, again, this integration has been vetted by both parties, and something we confidently stand behind. The settings have been worked out, again, in agreement with each company, and we'll show you how to access those right now. Basically tells you everything you need to know to get up and running and configure your system. So with the Energy Storage Partner Program, you'll find listed under our Resources tab on the Morningstar website, or you can just navigate directly to it using that top URL there. You'll scroll down to the bottom of that page, and you'll see a little information form with a bunch of check boxes for whichever brands of batteries you're interested in. Of course, in this case, we're looking at KiloVault, so we're going to submit the information form to access the KiloVault integration guide. And when you do that, you should get access to the PDF download. And within that PDF, again, it's going to tell you everything you need to know about the battery, the specific charge settings, those that are recommended, those that are optional, and then all of the required additional hardware and any steps and setup procedure you're going to need to configure your system in its entirety. And so what you'll find here is when you open up the PDF, you'll find that link right there that says MSView configuration files. So MSView, again, is our custom programming software that we use to upload these config files to any number of Morningstar data-enabled devices. And so by clicking on that hyperlink, you'll download a zip folder which contains all of the pre-populated, what are called setup wizards, for each controller with respect to the KiloVault batteries. So we'll show you that, an example coming up here. So when you access that zip folder, you're going to want to just go ahead and extract the contents. Just choose a destination folder. Again, you can put it in your downloads by default, or you can just put it on your desktop. You're going to want to go ahead and access the download the MSView software if you don't have it already. So you can find that on our main homepage. You just go to the Products tab, and it drops down to MSView there. You just click on that. It will take you to a little short blurb explaining what MSView is, and then there's a hyperlink there to initiate the download. So you go ahead and download that software, extract the contents, and run the program. And once you open up the program, you'll go to the Devices menu, and you'll click Search for Connected Devices. Of course, this would require a physical hardware connection to the device first, so you're going to want to go ahead and do that. If you do need a USB adapter, or if you can just connect directly to it, to the device, you can go ahead and make sure that hardware connection is set up. Once that's done, you go ahead and scan the ports to search for connected devices. You'll again, it'll come up with a whole list of devices connected on your network, either locally or via Ethernet, and then select the one you want. It should list the serial number as well, so you can verify if you have multiple products. You'll have different serial numbers, same name, and then go ahead and just highlight that one you want to connect to, click Connect, and it should appear in the left-hand sidebar under the Devices tab. And that icon, sometimes when you first click Connect, it should turn green. And that means, again, you have a connection. You'll see the serial number listed there along with the device name to ensure you're connected to the right device. You'll go ahead then and open up the appropriate setup wizard for that device. So again, if in this case, it's a TriStar MPPT 60. So we'll go ahead and open up the TriStar MPPT setup wizard under the Tools menu. And now when you do that, you'll go ahead and click the Read from File button at the bottom there, and then you will tell it to locate the file that you downloaded in the appropriate destination folder. So again, I just had it on my desktop, the KiloVault MSView configuration files folder, which again contains a list of all the setup wizards for all of the controllers that would be compatible with these batteries. However, given that we are using the TriStar MPPT setup wizard, it will automatically populate the .ts MPPT file type and auto-locate that, and then you can just click Open. So when you open that, it's going to populate all the settings. You can go back into the setup wizard and make any last-minute changes you want to do before uploading them to the controller. If there's anything more application-specific, maybe like lighting control options to turn loads on and off at different times of the day, anything like that you want to add to the custom config file, you can do that then. And you finish the setup wizard. Again, you'll see here, this is where that low temperature foldback is within the setup wizard under the charge mode, absorption and temp comp settings. That's where, again, you can program that linear D rate for cold temperatures. So then again, when you're all finished, you finish the setup wizard, and then you go ahead and just click Program TS MPPT in this case, and that will initiate the upload of the settings file to the controller. You'll go ahead and just cycle power to make sure that the new settings have been written to flash and stored in permanent memory, and then you can off you go. Basically, you have all of the settings uploaded successfully, and you can commission the system. So just to wrap things up here, in summary, what we're talking about is the choice of the battery technology, whether it is lead acid, or you're looking to make that move into the lithium space with a drop-in replacement, like those offered by KiloVault. There are definitely some important things to consider. The expected lifespan tends to be one of the main differentiating points. Of course, the need or lack thereof for maintenance requirements can definitely have an impact on that purchasing decision. And then what is the available space and budget you have to work with? Those are really the constraints on what go into making that decision. And you want to make sure you have all the information at hand to do so. So that's what Morningstar has attempted to do through its energy storage partner program, is to provide you with some of that information. And again, whether it's lead acid or lithium ion, you want to make sure that the settings are coming straight from the manufacturer, that they've been tested and vetted internally, and that you can both, confidently put your names behind the integration. And that's what we've done as well. With Morningstar, the benefit of having just very flexible controller settings, you'll find in MSView some very extensive settings options, as we just showed you, or even on the meter display locally. You have a lot of power at your fingertips to dial in specific settings for any number of battery chemistries. So again, that is something that when you're choosing the right controller for your batteries, you want to make sure that all of those settings again are available to be custom programmed, and that's what we again have tried to provide for our users. So with that said, I will go ahead and we'll just review this one last slide here, just a quick where to buy for the KiloVault batteries. Again, you can find them, I think as Nate mentioned early on the East Coast, you'll find it from the Alt-E store. On the West Coast, you'll find it from Real Goods, realgoods.com. So you'll find both website information listed there. And then we'll, I think, go on to the Q&A now. So if, Mark, I think if you had a chance to read over any of the questions that came in, maybe you could pose them to either Nate or I.
Sure.
To address the audience.
Absolutely. Hopefully you can hear me okay. We did
Yeah,
have
loud and clear.
questions that came in. So, and I apologize, you might hear my dog barking in the background, but just bear with me on that. But yeah, a lot of good questions. We had quite a few questions about the availability of KiloVault in different regions of the world. And from what I read, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, Nate, a KiloVault HLX can be shipped worldwide, and the HAB is currently limited to North and South America. You want to follow up, Nate, with that and make any corrections to my statement, or is that
No,
accurate?
that's pretty much still current at this point. The reason being is really just the HAB is still a little bit newer on the marketplace, so we're looking to keep most systems closer to home for the time being. The HLXs have been in the field for upwards of 2+ years now, and that's why we have a little bit more flexibility as to the range installation location. But the plan really is obviously to expand the HAB range as well to any location.
Okay, very good. Another question for you, Nate. This question says, how fast can we charge the HAB 7.5? How many hours will it take?
Right. So kind of a two-part question, I suppose. It might very well be limited by obviously either the charger, the AC charger, the inverter, or the PV charge controller, depending on the system. The HABs themselves can be charged at a rate of 150 amps continuously. What I will say is that we typically will recommend, especially in warmer environments, charging at much less than that rate, because you'll ultimately expand or lengthen the lifespan of the batteries tremendously if you do so. That's why when I was talking about the at least 4,000 cycles, we have our max charge and discharge currents listed, but we recommend, obviously, if you can charge and discharge the batteries at a slightly lesser rate for the majority of the time, every now and then isn't going to drastically change the cycle life. But if you can charge them at lesser rates the majority of the time, you ultimately expand their lifespan. So in theory, it's a 150 amp hour battery. If you charge it at, I believe the max charge rate is actually like 120 amps. That would be about a C1, a little bit less. So maybe more than an hour if you have 150 amps worth of charging current available from either your PV or your AC sources.
Okay, great. I have a question here about if you can share it. I know you had some information in this on your slides. Are you able to share that pricing information for the HAB?
I don't know if I have a slide on it. What I would say is the retail prices can be seen on currently only the Alt-E store and the Real Goods websites if you want to navigate to those. If you're interested in getting installer pricing on either of those, the best way would be to fill out an installer application with either Alt-E or Real Goods. If you're looking for reseller prices, like I said at the beginning of the slide, Jake, if you still have control, would you mind flipping to the next slide real quick in the presentation? Just so everyone can see, there is a link to the reseller application on the KiloVault website right here. So if you're interested in potentially distributing the batteries, go ahead and submit that application. They'll actually come right to me, and then I'll follow up to chat a little bit more about your company, what you typically sell and who you sell to, and the suitability of our product, and then ultimately, get some pricing in your hands. A good question.
Very good. Another HAB question coming up. Let's see. In the HAB IT application, can you see multiple batteries at the same site or only one by one?
I might pass it over to Marlon. Marlon, I don't believe we introduced, but is one of our technical support reps at KiloVault. Marlon, are you still on the line and able to answer that? He's done a lot more with the HAB IT application than I have. Let's see if he's still on.
I'm still here.
All right, you want to take this one, Marlon?
Yeah, sure. So yeah, once you have set up your each of your HABs in the Habit app, yeah, you can see data on all of them. You do have to go through them one by one, but yes, you can see data on all of your connected HABs.
Okay, very good. And I think this is there's another question here about the HAB. Let's see, would the HAB unit have ability to communicate with a cellular link for remote management during power loss?
No, the HABs are Wi-Fi only. That cellular communications have not been implemented, and as far as I know, they are not being currently considered. But that is definitely something that I will bring up with the product managers to have them think about.
Okay, very good. And can the HLX be used in a 48-volt application?
Absolutely.
Okay, very good. A lot of great questions coming in. Next one here, do you have a heat jacket for cold weather?
No, we do not have a heat jacket for either the HLX or the HABs. Now the CHLX does have an internal heater that it then uses in order to heat itself when it starts getting to the low range of the operating temperatures. But just to make sure you know that when the CHLX starts getting cold, the heater is actually run by charging current. The batteries will not say self-discharge, trying to keep themselves warm, so they won't, for example, get cold and then drain themselves. That will not happen.
Okay, great. Question coming in from Alan. Let's see. Regarding temperature range, I live in a tropical climate where for 5 to 6 months of the year, daytime temperatures can reach mid to high 30 degrees Celsius. Will this have a negative effect on the life expectancy of KiloVault batteries?
So for the HLXs, the charging temperature range is between 32 and 113 degrees Fahrenheit, or 0 to 45 degrees Celsius. For discharging, we're speaking Celsius here. The ranges from -20 to 16 degrees Celsius. So for discharging, going into the high 30s is fine. For charging, that also will work. Now it's a little bit narrower. It's narrower for the HAB. The operating range is between -15 and 35 degrees Celsius.
Okay,
and just to kind of piggyback on that, what Marlon was saying, with the HAB specifically, the main remedy, I would say, aside from having proper ventilation to keep the batteries cool in an environment like that, would be to reduce the charging current. So you'll see there will be verbiage in the manual that basically explains under certain conditions like those that you're describing in a tropical setting, you would want to not take advantage of that really, really high allowable charge current, because that's when you run the risk of harming the batteries or having them overheat if they're getting 150 amps of charge current and they're in 30 C plus. So you would really want to try to limit that in those cases.
Okay, very good. Question coming in from Dan. This is for Jake. Let's see, will Morningstar offer lithium iron phosphate charging settings on all their product lines? I guess if Jake, if you could tell us which controllers have these lithium iron phosphate charging settings now? And then if you know in the future, which ones will have them?
All right, let me, I think we had a slide of the controllers. Let's see, there we go. So yeah, this is all the lithium compatible controllers that we have now. And I think, yes, going forward, all future products should have some lithium iron phosphate compatibility, whether it's through custom settings, even potentially looking at what's called closed loop communication. That's what Nate mentioned earlier, is in development with the HAB. The ability to talk to third-party inverters and that kind of thing with the physical communication protocol. That's also something that we're looking into. But currently, anything that is custom programmable will have the capability to accommodate lithium specific charge settings. So whether they need to be manually custom programmed or they are available through the Energy Storage Partner Program, where you can find, you know, a list of supported partners that we already have the configuration files for. Just depends, you know, again, on which product. But all of the ones that are in our Energy Storage Partner Program, if they, aside from, you know, if they only provide batteries that are, say, 48 volt nominal, then that would narrow the range of compatible controllers, because then you have to have a controller that can support 48 volt output. But other than that, you know, most battery manufacturers will have sort of a range of voltages, and therefore your controller selection would be a little bit more open. Hope that answers the question.
Yep, I think so. There's someone here asking a question about how they can place an order in Nigeria. So for Nate, I guess, Nate or Marlon, you want to handle that one?
Yeah, I guess probably the best way would be to reach out, if it would be for just a single battery order, or for a single system, I should say, to go to one of our authorized distributors, which would be the altistore.com website or the realgoods.com website, and reach out to the sales reps there to get pricing and shipping and all of that.
It's the slide before, Jake, if you can.
If you slide forward one more to the information about the websites, that's the one. Terrific. There you go. Let's see. There's quite a few questions that have come in here, so I'm just going to try to pick off a few that we can handle here. Let's see. Okay, does the HAB or does it have balance voltages across the batteries within it? Question coming from Russell.
So yeah, good question. So the BMS within the HAB itself, it's an individual battery system, will balance the cells that make up that 48 volt battery. And then the HABs with that COM cable that I had discussed are able to balance each other throughout or between batteries in the same bank. So yes and yes, I suppose.
Okay. Perfect. Question from Jim. What is the lowest temperature that the CHLX can charge at?
It kind of depends on, so the internal temperature can't be lower than 32 degrees, right? So it really depends on, Marlon, actually, you might be able to answer this a little better than I can.
Right. So actually, hold on just a second. Let me this.
At least for, I mean, what I was really charging temperature for the CHLXs is obviously lower than that for the HLX. The discharging temperatures are about the same because at that point the heater isn't running, but it can be discharged down to -4 degrees Fahrenheit, which is -20 degrees C.
So basically, the HLX heater starts when the temperature reaches 0 degrees Celsius or 32. And it'll keep trying to keep the batteries warm. If there is a charging current down to -30 degrees Celsius, below that, it'll actually stop because the heat dissipation at that point is too great to try to bring the battery up to temperature.
Okay.
Okay.
Very good. Thank you. I think we have time for one more question. Those that we can't get to, we'll take offline. But I have a question here from Paul. It says, how much is the cycle lifetime degraded by running these batteries at 30 degrees Celsius ambient temperatures versus normal room temperature? That's for Nate or Marlon.
Yeah, it's a good question. It's kind of hard to get. I don't know if I have a quantitative answer. What I'll say is that, kind of like I mentioned before, at the higher temperatures, the just sitting in the ambient temperature isn't necessarily what's going to impact cycle life. It's likely more to do with how the batteries are cycled, meaning their charge and discharge currents. So if it's 30 degrees C and you're charging and discharging the batteries at 120 amps, then you're going to be getting, 4,000 cycles, if that, because that's really well above what we would recommend at those temperatures. If you're able to reduce the charge and discharge currents, even at those temperatures, when you have proper ventilation, you can expect, more than that. It just really depends, like I said, on how the batteries are treated in that environment.
Yeah, I was just going to say, we don't have a temperature to cycle life graph or comparison. So really does depend upon exactly as Nate was saying, how they're being used.
Okay, and you know what? I guess we can do maybe one more because I think this is a quick question. So again, this is for Nate and Marlon. So the question is, for a 14.2 volt configuration, do you stack 4 lithium iron phosphate cells in series?
Yeah, I might be misunderstanding the question. So if you have a 14.1 volt system, assuming it's a 12 volt nominal system, you could, in theory, stack up to 4 batteries in parallel. That would be the max bank size in a 12 volt configuration, if that's kind of what the question was trying to get at. If I misunderstood it, feel free to just go to the KiloVault website and you could submit questions there as well. It'll probably find its way back to Marlon or myself eventually anyways.
Exactly. Yeah, when you're putting your batteries in series, the voltages add. So yeah, you would actually end up putting your batteries in parallel in order to keep a nominal 12 volt battery bank if you were to put 4
I think what they were
series.
Sorry guys,
8 volt battery bank. Yeah.
cut you off, but I think what he was asking is within a 12 volt module, are there 4 cells in series? And for that, I believe it would be yes. There are 3.2 volt nominal lithium iron phosphate cells that are 4 in series per 12 volt module.
Yes.
Yes. Thanks, Jake.
No problem.
Okay, terrific, guys. Hey, I'm going to extend it for just one more question, then we are past the hour, so we really have to move on. But there is one more question here. Says, can the hab be mounted in any other orientation? For example, horizontal versus vertical?
No, it can only be mounted vertically.
Gotcha. Okay. Okay.
Like I said, it comes with that mounting bracket for vertical mounting only. The handles on the sides, again, intended for vertical mounting. So aside from the placement of the comm cables and the DC connectors and the fans, it's really also the mounting bracket and method that limits it to being mounted vertically.
Okay, terrific. So with that, we've gone well past the hour. Thanks for joining us, everybody. And hey, thanks for answering all these questions, Marlon, Nate, and Jake. You see the thank you slide up here. It does have, we're going to leave this up just for a few more seconds if you need to jot down any of these websites or phone numbers or information on how you can become a KiloVault reseller. With that, I'm going to close things out and conclude the broadcast. We will see you next time. Thanks so much for attending.
Thanks, everyone.